Pythagorean Formula, this is a review of Part 1. In today's lesson, students will review how to find the length of a missing side of a right triangle using the Pythagorean Formula. Using what? Very good. Today we're going to use what we know about the Pythagorean Formula to find the length of a missing side. What's the Pythagorean Formula? Repeat after me. Say, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Okay? So, Pythagoras told us that if you know the two lengths of a triangle, you can square them, add them, and then that will give you the length of the longest side squared. So, let's review. If I ask you to draw a triangle with a given line segment, how would you draw a right triangle? You could start from the top point of that line segment, and how many would you rise down? How many would you rise down? Let's go ahead and make our... Okay, so, and then we're going to run over. Remember, our rise is A. What's rise? And our run is B. What's run? Okay, so now we're going to count the units. Make sure you count them properly. You can use your jumps. So let's go ahead and see how many units. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, and don't write -6 because this is distance, and distance is always positive. It's always what? Good. All right. And then how many units is the run? 1, 2, 3. Great. So we know the rise is A. That's our vertical distance. So what's rise? 6. What's run? 3. Awesome. So our first step is to identify those. The second step is to put them in parentheses so that we can square them. So A is 6, so we put that in parentheses. B is 3. All right. So now we're going to square these sides. What's 6 squared? 6 squared is? It's not 6 times 2. Okay, it's 6 times 6. It's 36. What about 3 squared? 3 squared is? 9. Very good. Okay? So, then we add the sides. What is 36 plus 9? 36 plus 9, put it in your calculator. It's 45. Very good. All right. So the last step would be to do what? If 45 equals c squared, what do we have to do to both sides to undo the square? It's called square root. It's called what? Square root both sides, okay? So square root both sides, and the square root of 45, you're going to write here because that is an acceptable answer. So c is the square root of 45, but if you want to figure out, approximately, that's what the wave is for, what is the square root of 45? In your calculator, you put 45, and then you hit that square root button, right? So it's 6.708, and let me just tell you, if it's 6.708, I'm asking you to round to the nearest hundreds place. The 8, is it greater than 5? Yes, so it's going to round that up to a 1. Good job. So that's going to be 6.71. Understand how rounding works? Okay. Let's try number 2. Okay? So the first step to finding the length of this segment is to draw the rise and run, create a right triangle. So from this top point, we are going to rise down how many units? How many units will this be? And then we're going to run over, okay? So, how many units will you rise down? Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so that's positive 7, even though you're going down. And how many units do you run over? 1, 2, 3. Great. All right, so what's A? A is 7, good. And B is 3. Awesome. Our next step is to put these numbers in parentheses. What goes here? Okay, we're going to square 7 and we're going to square 3. We ask ourselves, what is 7 squared? 7 squared is, what is it? 49. Good. What's 3 squared? 9. Do you know what 49 plus 9 is? If you do not, put it in your calculator. You're adding these numbers. It is what? What goes here when you add these two? It is 58. Very good. 9 plus 9 is 18. Carry the 1. 1 plus 4 is 5. All right. What's the last step? What do you have to do to both sides? You have to, what do you call this symbol? Tell me. What's this called? Square root. The reason why you have to square root it is because you're looking for what C is, okay? But you have C squared. So if you square root C squared, you end up with C. So the square root of 58. We're going to write that right there. That is our answer. What is that approximately as a decimal? The square root of 58, put 58, hit the square root button, and I get that that is approximately 7.615. Again, I'm rounding it 2 places after the decimal. Look to the right. If it's 5 or more, round this up to a 2, right? So 7.62. Excellent, okay? Go ahead and get that down. So now you're pretty familiar with how to find the length of the longest side. You've been solving for C, right? Now let's take a look at the triangle. Now it's no longer on the coordinate plane. And to review a right triangle, you have the 2 legs, A and B, right? And the longest side is C. So we know A as the rise. What's A? Rise. Okay, that's the vertical distance. The run is B. What's run? B. And C is the hypotenuse. C is the what? Hypotenuse. And it's also the longest side, and it's also the slope, right? So now what we're going to do is we're going to see if we can solve for the missing side, and it might not be C. So here, what's missing? You don't know what? You don't know A. Do you know B? What's B? 6. Do you know C? It's 7, right? C is the slope. So we're already given the longest side. So we could identify A, B, and C and use the Pythagorean theorem to solve for the length or the rise. Do we know what the rise is? We don't, right? So A, I just want you to write as A. A does equal A. We don't know what it is. What's the run? What's the run? The run is B, yeah? That's the horizontal distance. So that's 6. What's the hypotenuse? What's C? C is 7. So look how this works. What we're going to do is we're going to plug in A, B, and C. The only thing that's a little bit different is that A is going to still be A, all right? So what is A? A is just going to be A. So put A in parentheses. What's B? B is 6. Very good. What's C? C is, what's C? C is 7. Cool. So now we have to square A, B, and C because we're trying to figure out what A is. And this is going to set up an equation for us. So what's A squared? You're just going to write A squared. All right, what's 6 squared? 6 squared is 36. Very good. 7 squared? 49. Okay, so now you have this equation. When you see an equation like this, now we're solving for A squared, just like we would solve for X. All right? What do you think you're going to have to do? How do you solve an equation? Well, let's separate both sides with a t. Leave some space. We're looking for a squared, okay? Now look at the 36. What's the opposite of positive 36, or the opposite of addition, right, is subtraction. Exactly. So we're going to subtract 36 from both sides. Look how this works. So instead of adding the sides, in this case, we're going to subtract them. Positive 36 and negative 36 makes 0. We're going to bring down a squared. A squared equals, now this is 49 minus 36. You can put in your calculator if you want. So 49 minus 36 is, what is it? It's 13, exactly. All right, it's 13. So if a squared equals 13, remember, we're looking for what a is. So we need to do something to both sides to undo the square. What do you do to both sides? You're going to what? Square root. That's right. When you square root a squared, you're left with a, because a squared is a times a, right? Let's square root this side. Square root of 13. You know what I'd like you to do? I'd like you to leave this as square root of 13 because it's more exact than the decimal. And you can go ahead and stop there. So if you were to put the answer, we would erase a, or actually right next to it, right? Square root of 13. All right? Now if you want to know what square root of 13 is, you put 13 square root. This is 3.6, all right? And that makes sense because 7 should be the longest side, all right? Let's take a look at example 4. So is this still a right triangle, even though it's flipped the other way? Of course it is, because you see that this is a 90-degree angle, right? And you're given, looks like you're given the rise. What's the rise? 2. And you're given the longest side. Now, just in case this confuses you, the longest side, which is the hypotenuse, is opposite or across from the 90-degree angle. So that's going to be the longest side. What are we missing? What's this? What's this? It's the run, right? Mm-hmm. So we're asked to now find what is the run, what is this missing side. So let's go ahead and write A. What's A? 2. Do we know what B is? No, so we're going to say that B is actually just B. We're looking for it, right? What's the hypotenuse? What's the longest side? The longest side is C. What's C? It's 8. Very good. Cool. Now we're going to plug in A, B, and C into the Pythagorean formula, okay? So we need to square all the sides. 2 squared is what we're going to write here. 2, sorry. So what's A? A is 2. B is still B. And C is 8. Great. Now you're going to square all of the sides. What's 2 squared? 2 squared? 4. Okay, what's B squared? It's B squared, yeah? Okay, B squared. 8 squared? 8 squared. 8 times 8, what is it? 64. Very good. Now, we're given an equation. It says 4 plus b squared equals 64. How do we solve for b? How do we solve for b? We have to make a t. Have to do what? Make a t. Okay? So you want to now, go ahead, we're looking for b. I want you to tell me what is the opposite of positive 4. It's negative 4. Subtract 4 from both sides. A positive 4 and a negative 4 make 0. You're going to go ahead and bring down b squared. 64 take away 4, what's that? 4 take away 4 is 0. And then bring down the 6. So it's 60. Awesome. All right? So if b squared equals 60, how are we going to get b by itself? Because we need b. What is the opposite of a square? It's a, what's this called? Square root. And whatever you do to one side, you have to do to the other side, okay? So, let's square root both sides. What is the square root of b squared? What are you going to be left with? You're going to be left with b. Very good, okay? Because b squared is just b times b. So the square root of that, you're left with b. Square root of 60 we can leave as the square root of 60, which is more exact than the decimal. And if you want, you can put into your calculator the square root of 60 just to see that that is 7.75, okay? So go ahead and get that down.